always acknowledge those ladies behind the scenes working really hard. Say hi. All right. Well, here we are, Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. So the last day of the month. Did you get all that you wanted to get accomplished this month? And if not, you still got a couple of hours. And if not, tomorrow is a new month, new day. You can carry out all of those agenda items. So welcome. My name is Michelle. You're joining us. Can do links to learning. So this is just an opportunity where we can, I think today, listen to the story. And I find in the last links to learning, I just find myself walking away inspired, but also building capacity, listening to the ideas and the goodness that's happening within organizations and communities around economic development. So welcome. We're honored that you have joined us. I'm joining from Amiskwaci, Waskahigan, Edmonton, Alberta, Treaty 6. So we'd love to hear where you are joining from. It's always important to acknowledge the land in which we live on. I originally come from Treaty 4 territory, so I always acknowledge that I'm a guest to this land and, set up home, set up business, I play, I shop. So acknowledging, the ancestors who've walked before us, walked before me, so I can live well in a good way in 2023. So thank Creator. I always like to take time, quickly pressing pause, even though I think Creator deserves a little more time, but just to press pause and acknowledge the goodness, the gifts that Creator has given to us. The sun rising in the east was the first gift. Us waking up is the second gift. Us walking in, our purpose, our passion, the things that we're good at. Some of us have gone to education post-secondary, so we really sharpened those gifts and sharpened our knowledge, and we're working in that. So we just give thanks for all of the good gifts that Creator has given to us. And this opportunity that we can gather across the nation, just to listen to the story, to be inspired. So we give thanks to Creator. Hi. All right. So today's webinar, Lands and Consultation Department Success Stories. I always love to hear the stories. They're always, for me, inspiring. I'm imagining, as I listen, we think in pictures. So just being able to imagine the good things that are happening when the stories are being told. And it helps me to vision also where I'm from, the possibility as well. So we have two guest speakers. We have Derek and we have Scott, who are joining us this afternoon. So Derek is the Deputy Chief of his Cree Nation in Ontario. I trust, Derek, you're going to let us know which community that is. And Scott Mackay, who's the founder, Senior Consultant of Shared Value Solutions Limited. And they're going to present on the challenges and successes of running an effective lands and consultation department. So they're just going to bring the story. They're just going to be real, and we are here for it. So we welcome you all. There will be opportunity for questions at the end, but if you have any questions, feel free to use that chat box along the way. We'll make sure we tend to them. We make sure they will be brought up. Because sometimes I will have a question and then I'll lose it the next moment. So it's good to write it down if you have one. So I'm going to pass this virtual mic over to our guest speakers. We are honored that you're joining us. And thank you for making the time. Thank you for carving out a space in your very busy life to present and tell the story with us today. So welcome.
Thank you, Michelle, for the lovely introduction. As Michelle said, I'm Scott Mackay, and I'd like to also acknowledge the land where I'm sitting right now, which is in the settler city of Guelph, Ontario, and I'm sitting in and on the lands of the Haudenosaunee people of the Six Nations and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And I hope and I strive every day to try to leave the land in a better place than when I arrived on it. So thank you for that. We're going to be giving you, myself and Derek, a presentation on the work that that Shared Value Solutions does, and that Derek does in his day-to-day work for Tagamou Nation. We'll do some more formal introductions in a second, but I want to let you know we're going to try to keep it to about 30 to 40 minutes in the presentation, and hopefully have a good chunk of time for questions and discussion afterwards. So thank you all for joining us today. What we want to talk about today is making the case for a lands and consultation department, the benefits of having it and what it does, how to structure it, ways to screen and prioritize referrals and consultation requests, a little bit about funding sources. There are many funding sources out there, especially these days. And some of the things to think about if you're thinking of outsourcing or to some extent outsourcing how your lands and consultation department functions. And then we'll have time for questions. So this presentation comes from the free ebook that Shared Value Solutions has published called Built to Last, a Lands and Consultation Department Guidebook, based out of our experiences and our clients' experiences from a number of places across Canada, including in Ontario, in British Columbia, and in the Northwest Territories. And this is available for download, again for free, and opportunity to connect into a number of other publications that Shared Value Solutions has, such as the TAL and our regular newsletter, which has lots of information about goings on in the areas of the work we do and funding sources. Shared Value Solutions, quickly, is an environmental and community development consulting firm with staff that serve First Nation, Métis, and Inuit nations from coast to coast to coast. Our team works alongside Indigenous nations across Canada, providing technical guidance, regulatory advice, environmental peer reviews, planning and negotiation strategy as they relate to major resource development projects. And we also do a lot of work in our clients' communities related to planning and lands. We are a company of Indigenous and non-Indigenous environmental, cultural heritage, planning and regulatory experts committed to braiding Indigenous knowledge with Western science to further our clients' goals of prosperity, stewardship, and jurisdiction. So that's us. So maybe I'll give Derek a moment to introduce himself. I'm really happy to have Derek here today, and Derek and I have worked together for a number of years, and I've been working with his nation, Taykwa Tagamou, for over a decade, to my great honor. So Derek, over to you.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the quick introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Archibald. I'm the Deputy Chief of Taykwa Tagamou Nation, or TTN for short. You know, I've been with TTN, since I was a summer student, worked my way up and eventually got elected as Deputy Chief. Over the course of the time, you know, I worked in the finance office, the economic development office, now starting to dabble in public relations and duty consult. So TTN, we're located, I don't know, about 20 kilometers from Cochrane, Ontario, or about an hour and 40 minutes from Timmins, Ontario. So TTN, formerly known as New Post. Our community has, we have two reserves, one just located outside of Cochrane and another one 140 kilometers north of Smooth Rock Falls. So these reserves are just right in the middle of major development projects such as hydroelectric and a lot of mining. Yeah. So go back over to you, Scott.
Okay. Thanks very much, Derek. I think I've been kind of nicely introduced by Michelle, but I'll just mention that I'm one of the founders of Shared Value Solutions. I'm not the founder. One of the roles I have in my work as a senior consultant is also serving as a contract lands director for Akodenico First Nation in the southwestern Northwest Territories. and for Cook's Ferry Indian Band, which is near Spence's Bridge in the southern interior of British Columbia. Not only work as a consultant, but I'm sort of directly embedded with a couple of communities and kind of really involved in the work. We're going to start out just providing a little bit of Taykwa Tagamou Nation's story, and I'll pass it back to Derek.
Great. Thanks. A few months ago, SVS kind of interviewed us about our departments. We were kind of in the midst of restructure our departments to kind of see what worked and what didn't, because like I said, we're right in the middle of a lot of development, and like we just, over the course of the years, 20 years or so, our community has come a long way. Like before, we were just basically managing poverty, and the band office was just barely staying afloat, and we started noticing a lot of development, a lot of activity actually, and our community's members were kind of expressing concerns, with the logging operations were affecting the trap lines, and the mining companies kind of polluting the waters, especially the pulp factories and the M&R were kind of giving us a hard time when we go harvesting. And so, it was evident that, our, the government or the M&R and proponents were really respecting our treaty rights. And, even to this day, it's really, really complicated sometimes or for them to engage with us, to properly engage. And it's becoming more complex. And so I guess after a few brainstorming sessions, we kind of developed a method on what kind of works for us and what doesn't. And so, we're not anti-development. Like, we welcome it, given that it's sustainable and that it's the impacts of the project are minimal, but also provides a lot of benefit for the community. And yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Derek. So when I think of what a lands and consultation department does, I would put it into sort of 6 different categories. These are big buckets, but these are the main things I think of. So one is to screen, review, and respond to requests for engagement and consultation from industry, and sometimes from the Crown around policy. Meeting with industry regulators or third parties to discuss or co-develop plans or procedures or legislation that may impact on rights and interests. To support other community departments or advisors to apply strategic pressure through the regulatory process to try to get things done. To inform community members of planned activities and to make sure that the community feels well informed about things that are happening in the territory and on reserve. To consult the community to understand their views and opinions on specific issues and to support community decision-making, and to manage all aspects of on-reserve lands and protect the rights, claims, interests, resources, and environment in traditional territory. Some of the benefits and the end goals of having a lands and consultation department are to have more control over development happening within the territory, and having a real say in and getting a fair share from development relative to the past. I think that'd be the most concise way I would say it. Derek, is there anything you want to add here around the benefits?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the successes is just kind of being involved early, where they're kind of developing like their plans to, for water management, like being engaged or involved in those early talks and kind of giving or kind of stating our issues, right? I think that some of them, and then just having developing that that early on relationship with the various teams of the proponents. And I think some of the success too is just, yeah, just kind of being at that table, voicing our concerns and just being involved early.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I'm glad you bring up the important topic of relationships with industry and government, because without a good relationship, really, you can't do anything, and you don't know to what extent to trust folks you're meeting across the table, and it's really difficult to develop agreements around how to move forward together without those really solid relationships. And as Derek pointed out, the lands and consultation department is often on the front lines for that relationship development. As Derek alluded to, there is a real connection between economic development and the lands department as well. And often I find that that we're working, as a lands director, that we're working often hand in hand with economic development people for my clients, and it's an important kind of dance and balancing act to kind of make sure that that both sides of that equation are being considered and dealt with. And as Derek said, as an example with Tagamou, not against development, but development has to happen in a good way, and it has to consider future generations, and it has to consider the lands and waters, and make sure that it's being done as good as it possibly can in terms of those important aspects. And otherwise, the opportunities it can bring to the community can be very valuable. So I want to say as well, in the work that I do, that we're not trying to stop development in most cases, but rather to, again, have a real say, get a fair share of that development, and make sure that the territory is protected, and that community well-being is protected as well through that, in terms of the connection to lands and waters. And maybe Derek, do you want to speak a little bit about the freedom from the dependency on government funding, and how that lands office connects with economic development around that in Taykwa?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, we're not anti-development, as long as that we play a role where we could receive some of these benefits, like at the end of the day, we're working towards self-sufficiency, where we could just, solve our own problems, right? Like if we like TTN and like other First Nations, the government only gives us so much money to work with, and yet, it's not enough. So by being involved in these projects where you're involved in every phase of the community, where we're kind of working towards equity, right? Receiving equity and profits, and reinvesting into the community to improve the social economic outcomes, right? So
yeah, thanks, Derek. One of the things I'm often asked is and it's often by council, is what are the benefits, or what's the point of engaging in this process? It's a colonial process, and it's not something that's tied to our traditions and our ways of our worldviews. And I want to, I often talk about a few key points to these benefits. So one of the things is it kind of lays a marker down for government industry that you're there, and that you're interested and willing to have a voice to protect your territory and your interests. So it puts them on notice that you're actively involved and interested in protecting your territory. It helps you become involved in identifying things that could help to prevent damage to the environment. So what we call mitigation in the environmental assessment process. So things that can be done to reduce or avoid damage to the environment. Or in many cases, we're also advocating for higher environmental standards. So when government would just say, okay, here's our rules and our limits, you know, in the past, proponents would say, okay, well, you know, we're following the government's rules and that's good enough. What we've been able to achieve often is that becomes the low bar for environmental protection, and we're able to, through negotiation with industry, achieve higher, sometimes much higher standards of environmental protection than if industry had just followed the government's rules. And that's been very powerful to have the leverage of rights and interests in order to help make that happen. To create economic benefits for the community, and we've talked a fair amount about that so far, but that can include jobs and training, can include contracting opportunities for community businesses or business partnerships, and as Derek already mentioned, revenue sharing and equity. And that all comes from, again, that leverage of Section 35 rights and interests, and in many cases in Canada now, more increasingly, the need for the community to provide consent for projects to really move forward. And also to have more influence in opposing a project if it doesn't conform with the community's goals and interests. So if you've participated in good faith in the process and not have been able to get your rights protected and your interests met, you've got a much better case if you've kind of gone through that process and then go to an opposition position than if you hadn't. So legally, that puts you in a better place. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about how to structure an effective lands and consultation department. We tend to think of 4 or 5 different roles when we talk about, you know, who's doing what, who's who in the zoo in a lands and consultation department. Like many places in Canada, within band administrations, the director is the highest staff level within a particular department. And that person is really kind of more at the sort of 50,000 foot level, overseeing, doing more of the relations with council and with industry and government. You've got a lands manager who's kind of overseeing and more involved in the processes of responding to industry and government requests for consultation. And they're really assisted by the lands coordinator, who's kind of really in the weeds, dealing with the things that are coming into the lands department inbox and things of that nature, coming through the mail sometimes still. And sometimes if you're in a really busy lands department, there can be even another administrative person, an administrator or clerk that's involved. And then what you may bring in technical people who are, you know, third-party consultants, or you may have folks on staff who are technical specialists who help to do different kinds of work. You may have environmental monitoring staff. You may have people who are out on the land trying to protect species at risk, for example, or who are doing water measurements. And so those folks become important resources the lands and consultation department is engaging with to help do its work. One of the really important parts about the lands and consultation department is clear communication, because you're working with all of those different parties. You're working with leadership, you're working with industry, you're working with council, with other staff, you're engaging with the community, and so you've got to make sure you've got a consistent way of communicating, and that you're communicating in the right way to different audiences, to make sure everyone understands and you can get your needs met as a lands department. And of course, you know, these are collective rights we're working to protect, and a collective land base in terms of the territory and treaty area. Derek, I know you talked about this in the interview we did with you for the ebook. And I wonder if you want to speak about that importance of communication for the lands department at TTN.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, communication is definitely major. Well, determined if it's gonna be if the project's gonna be successful, right? For TTN, we kind of developed a consultation protocol that proponents kind of use to engage with TTN and all our departments. And also, yeah, we do a lot of community consultation. So, like for every phase of the project, there's always a night where we just kind of have an open house where we explain the project, the benefits, and then usually if there's any questions, we try to answer them there. And if there's any concerns, and we kind of bring them to council, and then we kind of try to sort them out with the proponent. And yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And in terms of the structure of the lands office, it's really good to make sure that you've got the right people on point for the different aspects of communication. And one of the roles I play as a lands director is often that interface with council, making sure they're aware of the things that they need to be aware of. No politician wants to be blindsided by something that they should know about by a community member, a concern. And so we really work to try to support council in the roles that I've got as lands director, and make sure that they're regularly informed and they understand what's going on and understand issues. And then I often get brought into issues to if there are certain things that council needs to know about. So I've got a sort of specific role in communicating, and then I may be bringing other members of the lands department in to be involved in presentations to the community or meetings with industry. And we've often got sort of some specific talking points that we vetted with council first when we're going to meet with industry, or vetted with the band manager. I know that that many people across the country find themselves in the position that they may be the only person in their lands department, and sometimes that person is the chief. Or a very senior staff person with other roles and jobs. And I know that can be a tough place to be, especially with the flood of consultation requests that are often coming in. And just want to sort of take this moment to say, take heart. There's some things you can do to make your life better, and there's resources you can access. I'm going to talk about those ways of turning that consultation pile from a net drain, which I think often people experience it as being very draining, trying to manage that thing, and into a net gain, including gains around economic development. So capacity development is another really important part of the job of a lands consultation department, and a big part of that is often related to one of two things. One is getting boots on the ground to be out doing monitoring and guardian type of work on the land, so that you've got eyes and ears out there, and through those eyes and ears, often you're doing a lot of communication back to that theme about what the nation's expectations are for good environmental practices. And the other is around traditional and local knowledge, and having people trained to be out doing interviews with elders or land users and other kinds of knowledge holders to make sure that you're capturing in the correct way the knowledge that is present within the community about the land and waters and culture. And of course, those things are all very closely tied together. And so a chunk of our work for those of us who are managing lands departments is to make sure that you're building that capacity in an ongoing way. And just as an aside, a challenge with some of those jobs is often providing a consistent enough job that people want to stay and be in that role for a longer period of time, especially where there may be lots of other job opportunities. So for example, in the community that I work for as lands director in southern BC, the Trans Mountain Pipeline has come through and has created all sorts of really high-paying jobs, temporary jobs, but they pay well. And so for jobs like environmental monitors or guardians, you're often competing with that kind of spending power. Always going after funding and looking for opportunities for training and providing people with certifications. Those are all things that help to create not only good job benefits, but to a consistent job for people who are from your nation. One of the things that is often very important for the work I do as somebody who is sort of playing at least some part in the contract management of a lands department is having a local person. I have the great honor of working with some really, really great people on the ground locally in a couple of those nations I work with as lands director. That person's often got very strong cultural knowledge and local knowledge. They've got the family connections. They've got experience working with local government authorities, and they're a known entity to council as well. And often with council changing, sometimes every 2 years, as frequent as every 2 years, having that person, that community person who's there and is a known quantity in the community is really, really important. And that is often the focus of capacity building from my perspective. We're working to work ourselves out of a job, and capacity development is about building the ability for folks within the nation to take over that lands and consultation department fully, and for us to be there however the community needs us to be, but that there is a plan to transition away from a consultant running the department or being part of running the department to fully being run by the community. So back to that idea of how to focus on what matters, how to turn that consultation pile into a net gain, not a net drain. I want to talk about some different ways that we have worked with our clients to screen and prioritize the many consultation requests that come in, especially if you're in an area where there's lots of development happening. And so maybe I'll pass it again to Derek to share some of his experiences on this front, maybe the before and after.
Thanks. Yeah, before we worked with SVS on a organization system. We used to get probably 20 to 25 different notifications from the various ministries about permits and all these applications, and so some were really important that we kind of follow, and some of them just kind of let go. Yeah, it was just kind of chaotic, and so I think we kind of just sat down and just developed a system, right? And yeah.
Thanks, Derek. As I've sort of called out in that little red circle on the side, one of the first things we often do in our work for lands departments is to try to pull together all of the threads of who is getting these referrals, because it may often be lots of different government departments talking to lots of different people in the nation, and they may not even know in some cases that they're getting these things in their inbox or what they're for. So to make sure that you're contacting all of those agencies and all of those industry folks who are consulting with the community, and to say, we started a lands department, this is who you want to contact. Sometimes it involves copying the chief as well, but the main point of contact, where we've been directed, of course, by council to make that the main point of contact, is the lands department now. So, and then kind of reinforcing that when you see things going off in different directions again, bring it back and saying, no, you need to send this to our lands department. So that's seems like a really simple thing, but it's often a very powerful thing to do. Partially because it takes the work off of other people in the nation whose job isn't to do that, and to help them focus also on the things that matter in their jobs. So we look at 3 steps in screening things that are coming in, and developing responses. And the first is we do what's called triaging. Triaging, of course, comes from anybody who's ever watched a hospital show on TV. Comes from the medical world. So it's basically that you focus on people with injuries that are at the greatest risk, and then you go to lower levels afterwards. So you're again focusing on the things that matter and how you spend your time. So prioritizing based on 2 factors, which we look at, are usually importance, and we often have a very specific way of defining what importance is, and that specific way of defining that has been worked on in consultation with council and the community before we're applying that scheme of identifying importance, and then also urgency, so the time factor. The second is drafting the response, and then the process of drafting that response. There is often with council and senior staff, there is a process that's been identified to say, okay, depending on the type of response you're developing, it can come under the lands director's signature, or it has to go under the chief's signature, or it has to go to council as a whole to approve it before it goes out the door, depending on the kind of level of importance that response is to the community, or what other interests there may be in the community around that response, including things like making sure that the economic development department's had, or person has had eyes on it. And then following that process, sending the response and managing follow-up. It may be about additional meetings, it may be about receiving new information, because you often don't get everything you would like to have in evaluating something that's come in from industry. You may have a whole bunch of information requests you need to make, and then you have to deal with that new information that comes in. And then you may be issuing new letters or other kinds of responses. There's a whole host of things that can happen next. So, in general, around that issue of importance, in most cases, like, this is a generic way of looking at it, but projects with the greatest impact on your territory, rights and interests, those are the things that you want to spend the most time and focus on. So, for example, things like a major mining development, a major new transmission line, a new hydro dam, or a major refurbishment to a hydro dam, things of that nature. And on the flip side of that, low priority projects are projects that, with no likely impacts on your rights and interests, are happening outside of your territorial boundaries. Might be, the replacement of an existing culvert, outside of your territory. And it's amazing the stuff you may receive from government, thinking they know what your territory is and what kind of things that are important to focus on, and you still get small things. So you've got to filter out these things that can be distractions, and also you need to, in that filtering, also identify where something that looks like a minor issue actually may have some elements of it in terms of where it is relative to your cultural values or your community that may make it more important. So there's you can't do this kind of work automatically. You've got to always be actively screening. And then, of course, in the middle are projects that are moderate in terms of urgency and in the regulatory timeline. Oh, sorry. So in the nations that I work for, we really get pretty specific about what kinds of what factors we want to use to determine what's important and what's not, because those are very important decisions. And so we will break it down into some very specific criteria we look at, and we kind of put it all into a matrix or a spreadsheet and make sure that the person who's kind of at the front line for those referrals is doing it in a consistent way, and run through those each week. What's come in, how does it line up relative to these factors? So it could involve specific kinds of environmental risks, or certain kinds of development like a mine. Could be certain kinds of environmental risks like impacts to really culturally important species, so certain kinds of fish or certain areas within the territory, proximity to reserve lands, the potential for economic benefits and participation in development. So on the upside, not just the risk side, but on the opportunity side, and that proximity to important traditional use or cultural areas. So those are a few examples. And then, you can develop a complicated way of making these decisions. This is one from one of the communities we work with, where you're plugging the factors into this this scheme and coming up with a rating. And you can also use simpler ways of doing it, just like a spreadsheet. But doing it in a disciplined, systematic way can be really important. And one of the reasons for that being important is the fact that you've got to often explain down the road why you made a specific decision, and that's often you're explaining that to council or other senior staff, and you want to have that kind of track record of how you made that choice. And then for drafting the response, we often take a different approach to drafting the response depending on whether it's high priority, low or low priority, and often a much more detailed response for high priority, and medium priority taking an approach where you may be bringing forward certain kinds of best practices that the developer may need to follow, but may not be as detailed as you would with a high priority referral. And then for low priority, you're just kind of giving some very stock responses, and making sure that you're laying out your rights and your territory, and identifying that you don't have concerns with the development, but if anything changes, they need to come back to you again. So as an example, with a high priority referral for drafting the response, the lands coordinator packages up the referral information, figure out a timeline. You have any necessary meetings with consultants or other subject matter experts, and you have an internal deadline to make sure that you're able to get to each of those steps, and have time to engage with council or make edits to the letter as a result of getting feedback, and then you can get it out the door on time. As I mentioned, sending that initial response is just the beginning. You may have lots of follow-up things you need to do, whether that's getting people lined up to do environmental monitoring, whether it's additional information, dealing with additional information coming back to you and deciding how to respond to that, or having a meeting with industry. There's a range of different things that can happen out of the responses. And one of those things can also be getting into a negotiation process for some kind of agreement, like an impact benefit agreement, that's going to result in economic development benefits too. Derek, I'm wondering if you want to say a few things about what's come from some of the responses that have come from TTN's lands department.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, having a system in place like this really kind of allows us to focus our time and efforts on the really important, follow-ups. A lot of our success is kind of being notified early, especially when like in early exploration, and they're starting to grow and develop their plans. There were a few opportunities, economic opportunities for TTN to participate based on responding early and developing that early on relationship. You know, TTN is currently building the transmission line that, playing a big role in there. And we're also doing the financing and releasing the heavy equipment back to the mine. So there's, I mean, like getting early engagement, getting involved early is really key, and really kind of sets yourself apart from other First Nations on how they respond.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and that's one of the real benefits of making sure that you've kind of put that marker down, as I mentioned earlier, that industry knows they're going to have to, and government knows. Government's hopefully pushing industry to you as well. When that's all very clear, they know they're going to need to deal with you, and it's best to deal with you early rather than later, because you're gonna be effective in the consultation process, as I know TTN has been very effective over the years. I'll just briefly mention that one of the things that can be really helpful is developing some good tools for managing all of that information that comes through the consultation process. You can do it in a spreadsheet and keep it simple. And there's a number of different custom software solutions that exist out there as well, that give you a single window into all of that information, plus things like traditional knowledge and land use data, and other connection to things that other departments are doing. Happy to, if anyone has questions, suggest a few that are out there. We've also got a system that we've developed called Consultation Tracker that is based on Microsoft tools. So it cobbles together SharePoint and Power BI, a few plugins from Esri, the GIS company, and works as a package piece that we can deploy with our clients. But there's definitely lots of options out there around this kind of software. Knowing that we're getting a bit short on time, I want to get to questions. I will just indicate that on page 28 of the ebook that there's a detailed list of funding programs and which agencies are that funding is coming from. But many of our clients will get funding from government funding, but also from proponents in industry, often through impact benefit agreements, and may have their own source revenue from a number of different sources. And it's a combination of that often is funding the lands department. Derek, again, I'll just maybe turn to you if you've got anything you want to add around.
I think the next slide has my cool. So we had to get really creative, because they no longer INAC, they no longer kind of provide the core funding where it's just like flex and flexible funding. So now we had to get really creative. We had to use our source funding. Fortunately, in Northern Ontario, we have this thing, the resource revenue sharing. So we use that to reinvest into our departments. And then you can also kind of stack your funding as well with, proponent funded, to participate in the project. So there are some funding available. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Derek. I think I've talked a lot about this, but one of the benefits of, in the process of developing a lands and consultation departments is to start by outsourcing some aspects of it, or in some cases, all aspects of it, and making sure that you've got good kind of oversight and control of that through council and a band administrator. But that can be a great way to get started. And then you got folks who are, external resources that can come in, often that may have a range of other kind of technical skills, I know that one of the things I do is make sure that I get the department financially self-sustaining right off the bat as quickly as I can, and that helps to build that foundation as well. And so again, it's not a net drain on the nation, and get those systems put into place. And from there, it's fairly easy to bring people in slowly and train them and get that thing humming. And good consultants in most cases will want to step away from that and leave the community to do what they need to do, or to step back into a more advisory role in making it happen. So I know we've only got about 7 or 8 more minutes. I can stay a little bit past the hour, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I apologize for arriving a little late. So I wanted to find out if you gave this information out. I went and downloaded your ebook already from your website, and I could follow along. So thank you. That really helped. Did you show a map, or do you have a map of what communities or nations you've already worked in across Canada? For example, I'm from British Columbia, and I saw in the e-letter you worked with Thompson River Valley for the forests and the floods. And just to know which areas you have worked in, because Canada's big. Ontario is maybe your home place that you have more activity going on. And the second question is do you have, does a company in a nation have to have a budget for how large or small that you're willing to work with? Is it, or can it be anything that there's just some struggles and they want some consultation and some support?
Yeah, thanks. Those are great questions, Bonnie. I'll point you to the Shared Value Solutions website for information about who we've worked for and where we work. I think there's probably lots of information on there about different places we worked across Canada. And I think there's still is a client list in there somewhere that will give you that information as well. In terms of that first step, often even before we're hired, we will work with our clients who want to bring us in to get started on the lands department, and we'll help them find the funding before we get started. So if they have a budget and they've got some seed money to get it going, that's always helpful. But we're also willing to sort of walk with them together to help get the funding for that and to get it moving.
Okay, that's really promising, and I look forward to looking at the website and learning more about it. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks so much, Bonnie, for your question and jumping on in. I love it. Any other questions out there? I really appreciate your presentation today. I think for me, there was like kind of 4 pieces that stood out. And I did write them down. I think the number one thing, and I think Deputy Chief mentioned this earlier on, is that development has to happen in a good way. And I really honor you saying that. Good. The next one was consultation with the community. That's always important. Good communication, and even starting that conversation. I think in that, conversation, also still capacity building, which leads me to the last one, is you're really developing capacity within the nation. So those are kind of 4 of my takeaways. Really good presentation. And also, Bonnie mentioned it at the very beginning, there's that ebook that is available for free that you can access as well. Good tools that you've presented today. Any other questions? We have about a couple of moments left. We're just really honored that you've, shared the story here, and thank you so much for being here. And it doesn't appear that there are any questions. This presentation, this slide deck will also be emailed to you as well. So you will have all of this information at your fingertips. So Elsie, the gals in the back will be emailing that out to you. So good resource, good tools. Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing. Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Make the most of the last day of the month. And then we have a new month starting tomorrow. So thank you very much and take care.
Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And thanks, Derek, for joining me.
Thanks.